Hi everyone, I'm with Max Czerniega, CTO of Strikers Inc.
Hello.
And we've got some questions to ask him. Let's begin with your role. What does CTO mean and what are you doing on the project? These days, everyone knows what CEO means, but not this one.
CTO, Chief Technology Officer, Technical Director. Depending on the company, the CTO's duties will differ slightly. Here at Strikers Inc., I'm pretty much responsible for the whole process in terms of technology. I'm in charge of research, design, and architecture. I'm also heavily involved with the animation system, the back end, as well as the artificial intelligence systems. My task is to create and build up the team. I also help them with the fundamental structures and strategic design of our game. Among other things, I am looking for solutions to implement various functional elements within the game. And also, I'm kind of producing the project.
Your colleague, Eugene Ashilov, the CEO, has recently stated that the game is 80% ready. Obviously, 80% sounds nice, but everyone's eager to know about the remaining 20%. I mean, can you tell us which aspects of the game are still being developed?
When we were working on the 80%, we knew we should cover the whole game. We had to do absolutely everything. We planned every single mechanic so that the game would function the way we need it. It covers everything from sliding tackles and challenges to feints and collisions. Everything, you name it. But to make all these elements work properly, we need time. We need time to add variability and fine-tune every aspect of the game, and these take lots of time and effort. So we implemented all the mechanics, and now we're working on getting each of them up to the production quality that we're happy with. We have to fix bugs and polish and refine the game. It all takes time.
So what you're saying is there's no aspect that you haven't started yet or that you're working on from scratch. It's more about fixing a few issues and fine-tuning the elements that are basically ready. Is that it?
Right. And then there's cutscenes. We've already got some goal celebrations. What we're doing now is extending the pool, increasing the variety of cutscenes, creating more fun, more specialized versions.
Hi, Tolia. Good to see you. Can you tell us about the cutscene situation? What's new with them? What's happening? How ready are they? Please update our viewers.
The cutscenes are going really well. We've done a lot. But I'm afraid I can't give you a precise figure on how ready we are. There are still a whole bunch of ideas we want to implement before the release. You see, we never stop, but we are definitely on the home stretch. What I can tell you is we already know how many cutscenes we need in total, and we know what they should look like.
How long have you been working on the cutscenes? When did Strikers Inc. initiate that part of the process? And how would you describe your team's progress over the last year?
Actually, we started exactly a year and a half ago. 18 months ago, we dived into producing our first cutscene. And before that, we had a pre-production phase, when we looked for forms and new ideas, and when we wrote some scripts. But the first cutscene was ready 18 months ago. It looked very different to what you see now, though.
When you say different, do you mean progress? As in, did it become more realistic, cooler, and clearly better so everyone could see the difference? Or were you upgrading a few tiny aspects?
For our cutscenes, in fact, for any cutscene, the animation is absolutely key. It means everything. And now I think people can really see the difference, not just video game professionals. I think it's striking. When you compare the two, look at the samples here. It's clearly a whole new world. Our animation department is much stronger now. They've added some really cool things, and you can sense it straight away. There's a bunch of improvements when it comes to camera angles, camera work, replays. and also transitions between the game and broadcasts. As I said, there are plenty of improvements, not just technically, but visually too. The difference is huge.
Do you feel like TV broadcast directors when you're working on cutscenes? Are you simply trying to reproduce what we see on TV? Or do you try to take chances and add in features that would be absolutely impossible and never seen in real life, but which you can, of course, bring to life in a football simulation game?
Well, in game dev and in simulation games, and especially in sport video games, it's all about imitation. You're always aiming to reproduce the game we see on TV. Funnily enough, in broadcasting, we sometimes see it the other way around. They incorporate something taken from video games. For example, a true view camera that emulates a first-person view out there on the pitch, or a spider cam flying over the stadium, and so on and so on. We aim to create something that is as close to broadcast as possible, because we know, the fact is, everyone who watches real football, either in the stadium or on the TV, when they're watching our cutscenes, they can instinctively tell, almost immediately, whether or not it's accurate and true to life. And it's not just about the emotions that show in our animation. A player can sense it immediately. We all know that they can feel whether it's football or it isn't. You're never going to fool them.
As we all know, players often skip cutscenes. You don't want players to skip your work, obviously. So, any magic ingredients?
It goes without saying that we'd love to hook every player, so they will slow down for a moment and watch the scene to the end. Gameplay is obviously the essence of the game. A person normally wants to skip through and continue the gaming process, especially if they concede a goal and want to pull one back immediately. But I like to think there are people who take the time to watch and enjoy all the cutscenes, and they appreciate the effort. We definitely do it for them, first and foremost. To create fun, we always try to provide a player with the greatest variety of videos we can. I can't give numbers right now, but there are lots of them. Our game designer wrote a whole bunch of scripts, so every cutscene will match the exact situation, the precise context, as well as the context of the whole game. And I'm not just talking about goal celebrations. There are reactions, offsides, corners, and build-ups. And of course, there are free kick cutscenes. Every free kick is like its own mini-story. And depending on where the kick is being taken from, defenders behave differently, and the build-up is different. And there are lots of those plots. We always aim to make them entertaining, surprising, and fun to watch. Actually, we've deliberately made fouls and cards especially hard to predict. For example, we've come up with a system for when the referee approaches the footballer who committed the offense. You won't be able to predict what the referee's decision is going to be. We've deliberately planned the animations that way, and I like to think they work well. You see, usually anyone who plays a lot will know this. They know in advance what the punishment's going to be, even at the start of the cutscene. You can tell from the first frames of the animation.
Wow, that's cool. And since you mentioned cutscene selection, let's dig a bit deeper. Is there any specific way to match a cutscene to an event? For example, when there is a substitution or a yellow card is shown, or does a scene just get randomly selected from a pre-prepared pack? How does it work in that situation?
Like I said, the game designer put a lot of work into his scripts. Now it's up to the programmers to put it into the game, so it won't be as simple as just triggering each scene from the pool randomly. It would depend on a variety of factors, like at what point in the game the event happens. First half or second half or just before the final whistle, who plays for which team, etc. You can't just ignore those things. For example, let's imagine one of the teams makes a substitution. We need to be able to trigger a cutscene for that particular player in that specific context, so we get to see him from a certain angle, or we show us highlights from a previous match, or a trademark celebration.
And my last question is kind of weird. When we watch a real game, there can be bloopers. For example, the camera shaking, or a cameraman can lose track of a player, stumble, or bump into something, and so on. What I'm saying is, what we see on TV is not always perfect or smooth or perfectly timed. So, what do you think about incorporating that kind of thing into a football simulation game? Realism doesn't necessarily mean perfection. In fact, quite the opposite. What do you think? Am I talking nonsense, or would you agree?
You were quite right. In fact, you're spot on. That's a really interesting problem. In a simulation, a football simulation, everything's perfect. It's a world generated by the game engine, which is polished and clean. But what we're doing is adding some atmosphere to our game, breathing life into this generated world. And to do that, we're adding things like camera shakes, lens flare, imperfect focus with some distortion, as if we're really actually using a wide-angle camera. You know, the kind of lens that bends the edges of the shot. Nuances, imperfections, and hiccups are very real and essential. People who watch football on TV can tell whether a cutscene matches real life or not. I mean, they just know. We're working on these kinds of imperfections and have a good deal of the groundwork already done. We even set up a virtual camera to avoid the kind of program shakes that a procedural camera generates. They're too regular to feel real. So whenever possible, we film everything manually. First, we create a setup. We film a piece of action using a virtual camera. Once that's finished, we transfer the whole scene to the game engine and finish it off there. This means the cameraman's moves are real. And in my opinion, it's definitely paying off.
Let's talk about artificial intelligence, and in particular, AI assist. This is a question for you as CTO, but not about features of the assist, the game bot, or its specifics. So, not to do with the technical details, but rather AI assist itself. Obviously, it's one of the crucial aspects of the game and affects the release date. So, to what extent is AI ready? And another question, is it focused on being realistic, or are you keeping some arcade elements so that the gaming process doesn't become boring?
We definitely need a balance. We can't make a game that follows reality that closely. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a game anymore. And making it like an arcade game is not an option either. If we did that, it wouldn't feel like football. So, we're keeping it balanced. And talking about AI assist, our goal, first and foremost, was to create a fully adjustable system. That way our players will be able to set up and adjust their team's behavior any way they want. And our game designers, while they're working on the project, could do the same to reproduce the situations they need. We really wanted to make the system flexible, and then start finding the balance, iterating over and over again. In fact, that's exactly what we're doing right now.
So here's something I've always wanted to know. Is the AI system of each team based on how real-life footballers move and interact out there on the pitch?
You know, guides and patterns aren't born out of thin air. And our AI patterns are based on real football in real situations. We watch a whole bunch of real-life matches. We spend a lot of time watching teams and footballers very, very closely. Obviously, every football manager does their stuff differently, and their teams play differently too, with different tactics depending on the match situation. We take all this into account when we're working to find the patterns. But I can't say that in our game there are special tactics for particular real-life teams. Anyway, what I am saying is a player has all the tools possible to set up a team however they want. What I mean is, if a player wants to fine-tune their game world team to recreate their favorite real-world club, I believe they can.
That's cool.
Андрей, привет. Как дела?
Hi, Andre. How are you doing?
Слушай, давай напомним
I'm all right.
ребятам.
Tell us in a few words, what is artificial intelligence, or AI, to begin with? Just the basics so that we're on the same page.
Okay. To start with, there's AI bot and AI assist. Our team is in charge of the latter, AI assist. It's a system that controls all the footballers that a player isn't controlling manually. The way the rest of the team reacts, if you like, while the player moves the one on the ball. So you have a team of 11 footballers, but you can only control one of them at any one time. But while you are doing that, all the others are being guided by AI Assist, our system. So basically, what we're saying is AI Assist is your team. We've set it up so that it will support whatever action you choose to go for, whether it's an attack or in defense, if you're trying to regain possession, or whatever. AI Assist should understand what you're aiming to do and help you complete it rather than get in your way.
Cool. Got it. And maybe now would be a good time to tell us about the most challenging aspect of your job.
Let's start with the basics. The key issue we have is trying to understand every footballer's motivation. For example, let's take a footballer. Doesn't matter if he plays in attack or in defense. It's extremely difficult to understand and articulate, in a formal way, why he makes the decisions that he makes. Why one moment he's here and the next moment he feels he should move over there. Once we understand this, we have to apply that pattern to the footballer's behavioral model. And the main thing we have to consider is that such a model should be applicable to every situation in every game. So, let's face it, football is a fantastic, highly dynamic, and fast game. A game where everything can change in a blink of an eye. Here's a real example for you. Let's say we're working on a particular feature and we need to implement a footballer's positioning while they're passing the ball. We have guys in our team who played professional football, and we approach them. After all, they know the drill from the inside. We describe the situation, the context to them. We say, here's the ball, here are your teammates, you're here and the opponents are here, here, and over there. And we give them more detail about things like formation, their role, everything, and then ask them, what would you do? The thing is, guys who play football professionally intuitively know where they ought to be and move there. It's when you ask them to explain why that the hard work begins. They reply that it's the best position to get on the end of the pass, or I know he's going to hit the space, stuff like that. So, that's the tough bit. I have to come up with an algorithm of how to find this abstract best position. Is it being a particular distance from their teammate, a particular distance from their opponent, the best pass trajectory, their current position on the pitch, whatever. Something that I can measure. I have to make sure I understand why they chose to stand closer to the opposition goal. Or why are they moved further away, for example. Understanding the footballer's instincts. That is definitely our biggest challenge.
As you probably know, this episode is all about giving our viewers an update on the game's status. Could you tell everyone how it's going for your team? How things are progressing? What has changed since 2020? Or more specifically, over the last 12 months?
When it comes to readiness, the whole project is working to the strictest criteria of them all. And that is, could I show this to my mom? So based on this principle, I have to say we still have lots of work to do. For instance, our AI Assist is a composite structure, a whole complex consisting of lots of tiny atomic elements. And each one of those little elements has a particular role to play with its own designated rules within the system. It applies to anything that happens on the pitch, whether a player makes a run, finds space, tracks back, man marks his opposite number, or makes himself available. We have to cover all these actions for every player. And that's what we're doing right now, fine-tuning and balancing those subsystems and making them work harmoniously. And that takes a lot of time. Having said that, the major, most difficult elements are ready and good to go.
Cool. So, to wrap things up, why don't we talk about the future? What else is there that's left to be finished? Our CEO recently told us that the game is about 80% ready? Does the AI system take up a huge part of that 20% that's left to be done? Or is it only a little part of it? Are there any other elements that you'll soon be bringing over the line?
As I already mentioned, we've completed the bulk of the job, but there are still lots of little details that need fine-tuning and also lots of issues to be fixed before we can genuinely call the whole thing done.
Thanks a lot. We can't wait. Good luck.
All
All right, Max, I have another question for you. And this time, It's quite a significant one. After we published some gameplay videos, we read quite a few comments about a lack of realism around the footballers' movement and, well, some of the graphics in general. You know? I know all too well what work in progress means, and that you shouldn't think of the videos out there as a final product. But as I'm talking to a CTO, I can't miss my chance to ask, are there plans to address this? How are you going to update the system? And also, what was your reaction to the feedback?
Sure, we hear the feedback, and there are lots of plans. I can tell you, first of all, that we are proactive and we were working on some of those issues long before we got the feedback about them. I can reveal, for example, that we are changing the footballer's skeleton in the game's graphics. People who watched our videos pointed out to us that our characters' backs and shoulder joints didn't look great or move very naturally. The footballers were moving more like robots. But that's not because of the mock-ups we were making. Since we obviously don't film robots, we film real footballers in action. The cast are very professional, and they do an absolutely brilliant job. The problem was that the original skeleton of the models was really simple, but that original one was enough to get us up to the 80% mark. But not any further. Since then, in the polishing stage, we've improved it an awful lot. It's way more complex now, and the moves are much more fluid. The footballer's back, shoulders, and everything moves smoothly and naturally. The models now look more like real footballers. There are other features we're developing, of course, but I won't say anything now. We can probably reveal more in our next episodes. But I will say, the new skeleton gives us a real boost.
Does the skeleton literally mean a virtual skeleton of a person? Like, I don't know, hands, legs?
Judging by the skeleton animations available out there, players usually think of a computer skeleton differently to how it actually looks in a game. The reality is, ours is much closer to a real human skeleton. There are some differences, of course. In real life, the human body has a spine, a system, to which flesh and muscles are attached, and make that system move. In graphics, it's quite different. There's no such thing as muscular tissue. We're painstakingly developing our model to try and recreate the human skeleton movements as naturally as possible. Our animators can explain it much better than me. I'm not about to steal their thunder.
Hi, Misha. Misha is our animation director. Misha's here to talk about that new skeleton that Max Czerniega mentioned. Are there any other benefits from the transition to the new skeleton?
Definitely. We transitioned into the new system and, among other improvements, we've added more bones to the non-footballers. Referees will benefit from it more than anyone. So a referee, as well as footballers, can now pick something up and juggle it or do whatever we want them to do. And it'll work both in gameplay and in cutscenes. We've also added some bones needed for gameplay. It's improved the behavior in groups of players. They move more naturally now, and they can behave how we need them to in any situation, including interactions with other footballers. It all goes to make the gameplay more realistic.
So we've discussed the current state of play. We know the game is close to its release, and we've heard it'll hit the shelves next year. What are your plans now? What do you need to do next to finalize the skeleton system? What else do we need to wait for? Any major improvements you need to implement?
We still have lots of work to do. Right now, we are working on the player diversity system. They will be tall and short, big and small, muscular and thin. Before, we were trying to achieve that by creating lots of different models. It soaked up an immense amount of resources, both in system performance and the team. Now we're using this new style skeleton instead. And what this means is, we don't need a lot of models anymore. Just one is enough to create any player we want. He could have wide shoulders and thin legs, be tall, slim, bulky, anything. Also, we want to put some work into improving fabric physics, and the skeleton's bones will be involved in this too.
What if a big, strong guy that you want to add to the game, a dude with heavy arms and shoulders, isn't able to do some of the moves that the model does? Could that happen?
Good question. No, we've allowed for that, so it won't happen. We made the skeleton with the understanding that all the bones should work properly. Even in a very muscular person, all the bones are moving as they should, no matter what size. So neither the size nor body shape will affect this.
So, to conclude, the skeleton is ready, right? Or not? And if not, how much longer do you need to finish the skeleton system?
I would say the skeleton is ready, yes. We need to fix a couple of animation issues that appeared when we switched from the previous system. And we also need to make some finishing touches. But overall, I'd say it's about 80% ready.
Thanks a lot.
Двигаемся дальше.